I love being a dad. So do most guys I know, although a lot of people don't talk about it. Are we nailing it every single day? No, definitely no. But there is nothing better than seeing the little baby who you rock to sleep grow up into this crazy toddler running around exploring the world, who runs to you when they scrape their knee, who asks you to play that game for the 15,000th time and never gets tired of it. To know that you make them feel loved and make them feel safe. My guest today calls this the best time in history to be a dad. It's not to say that it's simple, though. Joe Gidjunis is like me, loves fatherhood, and set out to discover what makes a good dad today. He created this terrific documentary series called Grown Up Dad. It explores all the big, tricky issues, maintaining friendships as a father, affording childcare, gender roles, negotiating screen time. It's a great watch. Today, the quest to be a good dad. Joe Gidjunis, welcome to All Boy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Chance. I really appreciate this.
I watched every part of the documentary series, and we have so much to talk about, but let's start in your own home. Let's start with you becoming a dad. Can you tell us about your family?
I have a beautiful wife and he just turned 9. His name's Gabe, and I have a wonderful dog, and we are trying to make it work just like everybody else. It's hard whether you have 1 or whether you have 7, and what I love, though, about being a dad is just how much joy and fulfillment it has brought into my life. And it's a message that I never got growing up. And it's a message that even when my wife got pregnant, I wasn't hearing from so many people. And so the idea that I would even want to be a father and then make it this amazing, important part of my life is just something that really caught me by surprise.
Well, and that's the whole conceit, is you have this child and you go, oh my God, this is amazing. Why did nobody tell me this? No one said, 1, you are important to this too, and 2, it's not just, oh, you'll figure it out. You're kind of a bit player. You want to be a main player,
right.
And
just
you take this
money. That's all you need, right? That's all. Wanting to be this part of it, and I mean, really, I grew up with a more traditional provider model of a father. He worked out of town even. There would be many months where I might see him only 2-3 days a month.
Wow.
And, I think he thought he was being a good dad. I don't blame him for that. But I didn't want to be that kind of dad. I missed so much of that relationship. He wasn't there when so many dramatic things are happening to you as you're forming these core memories of who you are in your own identity and growing up with so many trials and tribulations. And so when it really got real for me, I think like so many parents too, not only obviously when your child's born, but for me it was my kid is 3 and we're in the middle of COVID. Or COVID's really just starting, and I'm just like, I am feeling so unprepared and I do not know how to do this. And if I don't know how to do this and I'm actively trying to figure it out, so many other dads must be in the same position I am. And so being a kid of the 80s and loving television, like I wanted to figure this out, and I'm like, I wanted to make a show about like how this happened, but I didn't even find the right role models. I was finding the role models I grew up with were the TV dads. They were the Al Bundys, the Tim the Toolman Taylors. And these guys are lovable, they're funny, but they're not who I wanted to be. They're bumbling, right?
Were you scared to say Cliff Huxtable? Because growing up, I know now's a different time, but growing up, I always said if I was going to be part of one family, it was either Growing Pains or the Huxtables.
Right.
And both had a dad who really cared and was involved and wasn't this bumbling idiot.
So I'm in Philadelphia. He lives here. Everything happened here. We had multiple conversations about whether or not we interview him or not. And we ultimately decided, like, no, we don't want to give him a platform for anything after all that has happened. And it's so hard to recognize, like, that show was fantastic, and he was one of the best models for TV dads. And it's unwatchable now, knowing what he was really like.
So it's this best kept secret among men is that it's amazing to be a dad. It is at times wrenching to be a dad. You're always striving in many ways. And
were you in my house last night? Did you see me?
I have twin 6-year-olds, and they're both boys, and they're wild and crazy, and I love them so much. You were a son. you have a son, Gabe, I think is his name. This show is all boy. How did you think about this, fathering a son in particular when you were doing this?
No one has asked me that question, Chance. That's really good. I think I was just grateful to have a healthy baby. Of course, I think we all
Yeah.
are, especially when, a day later they're like, "Here you go, bye-bye," and you're like, "Wait, I don't even know how to install the car seat, and you're gonna just send this kid with me." Um, I didn't know what my relationship would be with my son, and honestly, I think I had concerns about having a son
Yeah.
because of the relationship I had with my dad. I don't think I cared one way or the other, but I actually think I had more concerns about having a son.
That's exactly what I was wondering because, my dad, kind of similar, my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old. And now I can very much see that was the right thing for them to do. But at the time, every other weekend with him and just yearning for him
Yeah.
and wondering, what I would have done differently if I were him at that time. And, you give your parents a lot of slack looking back in retrospect because a different time, place, they were raised a certain way. But going in and having sons, and I thought, I'm gay, and I thought, I don't know how to do this to teach them how to watch sports or something like that. And then you realize they don't care, and they love you, and you love them, and it all works out so well. And we're joining Cub Scouts, and I'm going to go camping, so pray for me, and that's what we're doing. But it's funny how you do figure it out, right?
You do if you want to, and if you're looking
Yeah.
for answers. It's so easy to repeat history. It's so easy to just say like, "Well, it worked for me," and without asking yourself, "Did it really work for you?
Good point.
Was that acceptable for me at my time? And how was I impacted by that, for good or bad?" Some of it is fine. I'm not at all in this series saying that the previous generation messed things up. Each generation has their own way of doing things, their own understanding of parenting, and honestly, the start of technology for us and our generation, for our parents, was plenty difficult. That has been upped exponentially for what we're about to go through. Your kids are just a little bit younger than Gabe. Gabe's generation will have always known AI in the classroom his entire life. He'll never have not known it because it came out, really, ChatGPT 3 years ago, and he was in kindergarten. And so it's going to be a totally different game for us, and how we have to level up as parents and what we have to deal with too.
Real quick, before we move into some practical elements that you cover, your dad, his picture was in the documentary series, and at the beginning you say it was kind of a drive-by parenting situation, and you talk about his limited connections and things like that. How did he feel about this? Did he watch it?
He definitely watched it. I didn't force it on him. I didn't say, "Hey Dad, watch this now. Look what I did and how I put you in it." But he volunteered to watch it. I was very happy that he did. He said he's proud of me for it, which has meant a lot. He and I have a relationship now that's, I would say, is solid. But I've told him this, and I'm not afraid to say it, but he will never have the relationship with me, as similar to the relationship I have with my son. There was just too many years not there, too many parts of my life he wasn't there for. But he is a good grandfather, and that has brought up its own feelings in me too, because I see him being a wonderful grandfather to my son.
Yeah.
In a way, better to him than he was to me. And there were times in my life where I'm like, do I want to have the same kind of relationship with him now? And how do I, again, protect my son from that too? How do I protect Gabe from any of that possible pain? And ultimately I was decided no, my dad has earned his spot in his grandson's life, and I want to make sure that he has a great relationship with him. And Gabe has understood a little bit of my pain from the show, but he's still a kid, and I don't need him to fully understand that. He knows he knows that I've had that, but I don't want him to experience that.
Well, and when you talk about him being a different grandfather than maybe he was a father, my mom shared something with me that impacted her that I thought, that's beautifully put. She said, the reason we love being grandparents so much is because we get to have you all over again. And maybe we didn't do it all right the first
Right.
time. Maybe we weren't as patient or as soft. And we're really getting to do it again with you, which, that made me tear up the moment I heard it, because I thought,
Beautiful. That's
with
really
my
cool.
boys one day, I can only imagine seeing them again. So maybe that's part of what your dad's feeling right now too. Um,
You might be right. You might be
as
right.
as far as a role model, you picked someone in the series I did not expect, but I'm very familiar with. Bandit Healer. Can you tell
Bandit
people?
Healer, my go-to inspiration for best dad award is a fictional animated cartoon dog from Australia, Chance, and I have no qualms about that whatsoever because Bandit is the best written TV dad I think in history, and it just made me feel so seen and gave me vibes of I want to be more like this guy because I think he is doing it the right way, and it's so much fun. I mean, look, Bluey became this worldwide phenomena.
Right.
Came out during COVID too, so that's where it goes back to I was watching these TV dads. They were all bumbling, lovable, funny, but not who you wanted to be. And then Bandit comes on screen. I'm like, where has this been all my life? So the project actually started because I'm inspired, and I'm like, how does Australia have a monopoly on good fatherhood?
A
Because
good
it's
dad.
not just the show wasn't just an Australian show. It went to Britain and UK, and then came here on Disney. And for a show to be that powerful and popular, the society had to embrace it, had to absolutely love it and see themselves in it. And so I decided I wanted to make a documentary looking at Australia versus the US and parenting styles and understanding what that role was. What happened was I ended up going to Australia. I met Joe Brum. We had
Yeah.
a great meal together. Fantastic guy. And I talked to other dads in Australia and just came back with all these great experiences. Came back here and I had so much to work with. And I'm starting to make, at that time, a feature documentary film is my hope. When my trailer came out at the PBS station up in New York, the Buffalo Toronto station, I'm so thankful for them. Saw it, believed in it, and said, hey, this should actually be a TV series, not a documentary movie. And at that time, I was so relieved because I'm like, I have so many things I want to talk about, so many topics that I'm like, yes, this is exactly what it should be. So we made a pilot 2 years ago from the Australia footage. And then it did well enough that PBS was like, yes, let's make 4 more. So the full first season came out this past summer in June around Father's Day. We had 5 episodes. And you can still watch the show now on PBS Passport or YouTube.
Yes, and people should. They should watch all of them because you hit different, really important pieces of fatherhood. But can I tell you, Joe, when I saw you select Bandit Healer, first of all, I didn't know at the beginning of the show that it was Australian because we watch everything in Spanish in my house. So it took me a while to catch up to be like, oh, this
Really?
is Australia. Yes. My husband's from Argentina, and so we try to do mostly Spanish at home.
I had not gotten that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
But so, now I know after a month or so of watching it that the Bandit's from Australia. I caught on to that.
Okay. It's not an Australian Spanish accent, right?
I don't know. My Spanish isn't that good. That's the problem. But I'm the English teacher in the house. But watching the show, I have to be honest, I so often think, too high. You have set the bar too
You
high.
have.
My kids want me to engage in all of this, imagination and play and get on the floor and hurt my back or whatever.
Right.
We're in our I don't know. I was born in 1984. I don't know about you. I was piecing together.
82, yes.
Yes. And so my back isn't what it was.
Mm-mm.
And so anyway, sometimes
No,
Bandit,
I
I'm
need
like,
a good night's sleep or it's awful.
Bandit,
Like that,
stop
right?
playing all these games because I cannot participate in every single game. I mean, did you grapple with that at all?
Oh, 100%. The biggest criticism of the show is that the parents, Chili and Bandit, are too perfect, that no one is like that. And I have always come at this like, no, it's not. The show's not meant to put you down. It's always just meant to be inspirational. And for me, the main lesson I just love taking from Bluey is like, Bandit is great for 7 minutes at a time. So if you haven't seen Bluey, episodes are about 7-8 minutes long. And so it's not about being perfect 24 hours a day. No one can do that. Even dogs with unlimited energy can't do that. Um, and that's actually kind of part of the joke. It's like dogs never run out of energy, right? But the the,
Oh,
the bandit is just he's great 7 minutes at a time. And so to
yeah.
me, it was like I can bite off 7 minutes right now with my kid and make a great memory. It's not that I'm going to be perfect all day long.
Okay, yeah, I like that perspective. It's also that I was looking up Bluey Wiki, and did you
Oh,
know that it's Bandit Healer PhD? He's an archaeologist.
yes,
So I assume because his girls are
he digs
young.
bones. He digs
The,
bones. That's
okay.
right.
Oh, that's kind of fun. Okay. But he has these young girls,
Yes.
young daughters, and he has
Yeah, a
Bingo and
misconception.
Bluey.
Bluey and Bingo are both daughters. They're both girls. Yes.
Both girls, and they're younger. He has a PhD, which to me tells me that he's older. And I became a dad at 35. And something that's not really discussed a lot in your documentary is that, people with higher educational attainment become parents at older ages. They typically
Mhm.
make more money. They might have more perspective, might have more patience. Did you think about age when you were doing this?
In terms of like parents' ages
Well,
or my
yeah.
own feeling like I'm getting old too.
Well, more, I think about my mom. Let's say she was 20 and 21 when she had her children.
Oh wow.
She was married, but at that time, you started much earlier and you have more energy, perhaps. She could run us around to the Blue Ridge Mall in Independence, Missouri all day long and never tire. But you also maybe have a shorter patience. You maybe have less perspective on
Mhm.
life. And Bluey, the dad in Bluey, he is an older dad, and that
Mm.
just strikes me as an older dad. I don't know.
I've not read that anywhere, and I love that explanation. That absolutely makes complete sense too. That he would have found ways to bring that perspective, as you said, like into his life and into his parenting and what's really important and what doesn't matter. And honestly, like, I'm thinking my 20s, and I'm like, I was still really an idiot. Not that I haven't
Yeah,
figured out now either, but I look back at my 20s, I'm like, I made a lot of mistakes. Thank goodness I didn't have my son yet. So
yeah.
I was 33, and my wife was 35. And honestly, too, the term that was great. She was a geriatric when she gave birth to her first
Technically.
child. Yeah, let's not. That's a whole separate episode of problematic language, and we definitely were way more capable having that extra time to figure out what is really important and what do we want to do with our son.
One other thing I want to ask you about with that is, did you think about the issue of class when you're thinking about fatherhood? Because I had Richard Reeves on, and we were talking about this. That
Isn't he
with
great? Isn't Richard great?
amazing,
He's really
amazing AIBM, terrific.
yeah.
Um, Lower educational attainment, now
Mhm.
less likely to get married, less likely to have children. And, if you're working multiple jobs, if you don't have, a stable two-parent home
Mhm.
environment, all these stressors exist. And, I don't know. Did you think about class? Because to me, watching this, I saw mostly men who seem to be fairly educated. Um, and it can be a lot harder maybe for people of different classes.
To me, the show, it's a great question. It's a two-part answer here. To me, the show has always been like, I don't want to do a show about gay dads. I don't want to be a show
Mhm.
about, military dads. Like, to me, a dad is a dad is a dad, and whatever situation you're in, you're dealing with the challenge that's
Mhm.
in front of you. And so you're always going to see a mix of people interviewed in my show with different economic backgrounds and classes and educational levels. But it was really brought to me acutely about a year in when I remember interviewing more like a dad trainer, like in a parenting class, and he would talk about how he has to explain to a lot of fathers, generally of a little bit of a lower economic class. It's like, yeah, dads, you can get on the ground, you can like play and wrestle with your kids, you can just play with your kids. Had not been explained as well. They hadn't seen themselves in that role and that ability, and um, it was that one was a bit more kind of jarring to me for a second because there was like again, what assumptions am I making about my own life and bubble that everyone is experiencing that really is not true to everyone, and so really trying to open up like, hey, how many kids do you want to have? That's awesome. You want to like there was a father in New York we met, Maurice. I mean, he wants I think he said he wanted 10 or 12
No,
kids.
he said 12.
He said 12, right? Um, so I purposely too, like I don't go into my interviews knowing everything, okay? Because I want that genuine reaction. That was a genuine reaction when he said 12, because I was like, you want to field a football team,
Right?
kid for himself,
And he
but
said,
that
yeah.
kind of love and like that he could fill his heart with 12 kids with a straight face and be like, I want that many. I've got room and capacity for that many. Was just an absolutely beautiful thing. But then we also talked about how are you going to afford it? And that's where you go back to your education level and it's like, yeah, this is so hard to have kids today because of that. And here is the
Exactly.
line. We didn't do an episode on daycare. We were going to. And we actually started a good amount of interviewing about it, but there's so much about daycare and childcare that we didn't know if we had enough to like say and move the needle. But in part of the interview process, we talked to a guy who's like, children are a luxury item today because of how expensive it is to have kids. I mean, think about that. You don't need to have a Gucci, watch, Chanel bag, or something. Just having a kid's like, I am of a certain economic class because I can afford to have a kid today.
And you look at the number of children people are having, most people say they would like to have more, but they simply can't afford it.
Can't
And
afford it.
a lot of these moments of self-actualization or broadening horizons or whatever, higher order things. And when you're thinking, how can I afford diapers?
Right.
Are we going to be able to cover childcare that I can get to my 2 jobs? I was watching this and thinking, there are different things that are different levels of difficulty for everyone, but just those necessities, sometimes I'm thinking, my gosh, if you're just trying to satisfy those, it can be hard to feel like I'm just so pleased as a dad. I'm just basking in it because it's hard to make it through every day, So anyway, I was just thinking about that, watching that.
No, that's a great moment of joy, and we need those because it is so hard. It is. I mean, we joke about it that it's the best and hardest thing we'll ever do, but you need to have those moments to keep you going. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. How am I going to get through the day?
Now, I did love to see the data you pulled, which was in 1965, the average dad spent 2.5 hours a week with his kids. A week.
I still crack up thinking 2.5 hours a week. I'm like, I do that. I hope I do that every day. If I don't do it every day, I don't feel like I've been a great dad.
At least.
Present, right?
And you said in 2016, it's now on average 8 hours a week. I think that's still probably half of what moms typically do, we should note. And you also do say it's still 8 hours is also less than the amount of TV time men are participating in.
Right.
So
in
allocation is still an issue.
In that particular survey at that time, all that was true. I think today, so COVID changed some of the norms. And what was hard about COVID is like, was this going to change a lot of kind of the status quo, or was it a temporary thing? And some things have stayed, some things haven't. I would say, I bet the average the next time this surveys come out, our generation of dads is probably going to be over 10 hours a week. I think we're definitely continuing to be more present. I hear it from people that our generation is far more involved than our parents, our fathers' generations. That's not to say, though, that it is equal in any way. Moms are still outpacing it, and I think what's most difficult, too, for moms is, in the 60s, 70s, they were doing all of that child care, they were doing all the household care, but they were doing it without the full-time job on top. And now they have to do all of those things, and they have to do the full-time job. And so equity is definitely has to be talked about, because when we talk about birth rate, to go back to what you were just saying, there are a few studies that are coming out of Europe and Scandinavian countries showing a correlation between higher birth rates and more equity in the home. So essentially, what there's the correlation is if the dad, father, husband, partner is more present and is actually doing more chores and taking on more household duties, the actual number of children that family is going to have is going up. And I think it's because moms, women are saying they have the capacity to take that on. And I mean, just last night, I'm at a Phillies game with a buddy, and he's like, yeah, I'd like to have another kid, but his wife's working too many hours. They're like, if we're going to have another kid, she's actually probably going to have to change jobs and figure that out because of, and it's not just a money thing, it's literally a time thing. And I get that so much. I don't know about you, it's like figuring out how to have more kids and more time is always the jigsaw puzzle of this life, right?
I think the time ran out, based on the calendar. It was like, okay, no more, too old. That's not going to happen. But for people who do want to have more, you want them to be able to pull it off. And, that reminds me of the point that Danny Loves Pasta. He was one of the characters in here. And he said...
His food's so good. Please follow him on Instagram. It's so good.
It looked amazing. But he made the point of the hard parts of parenting have traditionally been the women doing it. You know, getting up overnight, tending to the child who's infirm and what have you. That men typically get to do kind of the fun stuff. And I mean, men are good at that. You also look at the studies, are good at roughhousing and riling them up and encouraging them to take risks, and that's really important. But as men say they're more interested in getting married and having children than even young women are saying, to me that shows up and I call them the playground dads here in DC. Half the people there are usually men, and a lot of us have gray in our hair. And I think we really value and treasure these moments.
Man. You got a really nice mixture going on there. I love it.
And, I think that men are treasuring that a little bit more now, making sure you implement that, as you called it, equity, making sure that you're on the class listserv or you're planning the party or you're showing up and doing the play date. That's important. Are men doing that?
I mean, I think, again, this goes back to understanding what that role is and what do we want it to be. I think about, I say it's the best time in history to be a father because we get to decide what that means. But what's difficult is we have never been asked that question before. Like, I don't think our fathers and our grandfathers were ever asked, what kind of dad do you want to be?
No.
I think there was, you were successful if you fit within this narrow mold, and if you don't fit in it, that's not you. Now, granted, I think the bar was also pretty low. I think the bar is higher, and that is both comes with pros and cons as well. I love the fulfillment and the joy I get. The more I'm with my son, the more the happier I am. Not all the time, more, but for a lot of it, I'm pretty darn lucky.
But that night, once he's in bed, you are, no matter what. That's how I always feel. Like, okay, now I want to look at the pictures and be happy. Yeah.
What's bedtime in your house right now?
Right now, we're about to be 6 years old, so it's about 8. What's it there?
We've been trying to keep it to 9. He keeps pushing it a little bit. But he's such a good sleeper. I mean, he gets up at like 6:45 in the morning, no alarm clock on his own.
Wow.
Still. I'm like, I can't do that.
No.
I need that alarm clock. But yeah, you get that. But when it gets later and later, I'm like, right, there's less time for me when he gets to bed a little bit later too. So I'm working on that balance because I'm like, yeah, he's not going to bed at 8 anymore. My me time has been shrinking. I need to figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah. My friend Meg, she with her kids as they each get older, she watches Modern Family with them. She's like, okay, this is your introduction to being up later. And I remember thinking, like, I want to watch Roseanne and Grace Under Fire with my mom. And she's like, go to bed. But this is a new age. Now, I was wondering, after all those conversations, and you disclose, a lot of personal things from your household and your family, even the vasectomy and all this. Did you change anything after having those equity conversations and say, actually, maybe I ought to step up in this certain way. That men, when they're listening to this, they think, how do I do that?
What's tough about the show is I was a journalist, like a reporter like you, for so many years, and so you would start with the lead, right? You'd start with the most important information. I had to change all of that with the documentary and writing for television. That you end with the best parts at the end. You build up and that rising action. So there was the director in me had to know where the story was going, but the character of grown-up dad in the show had to be totally surprised at the same time. So there were things that I would really, again, try to not know as much as possible, but also have enough to know where we were going. And so particularly with equity, there were things in the house which were already, I think before I started the show, I think it was more about 60-40. I actually do more with my son now than my wife does. And that's, I think, also just partly because of what his interests are. I am his baseball coach. I take him to all the sporting things. She does some of it too, of course, so it can't be everywhere. And she loves sports. But there are certain things right now I am actually probably a little bit above half. But I also know there's going to be times coming up where she's going to be back on top. And what I want to actually talk about equity more and explore this, because equity is not a 50-50 thing all the time. Like, there are too many days where you and your partner, you get home and you both have 20%. It's not like you can come home and be like, babe, I only got 20% left in me. You better find 80.
Yeah.
That's not how this works. It's the days when you are like, we both are at 20%. It's 6:30. We haven't started dinner because our day's just ended. We got to get to 9 o'clock, feed ourselves, feed our kid, and make sure that we're all successful for the next day. That's more what equity is. And I think those are the conversations we need to have, because I think the idea has gotten off the rails and made men feel like that our contributions haven't mattered and don't matter. And it's like, I don't think it's about that. Like, there's certain household things that we can talk about, sure, in like 50-50 terms, but I think it's how, as a team, do you get to 100%?
Yeah.
That's what equity, I think, should be talked about.
I like how you say that. I once had a boss who, she was a working mom her whole life, became the president of a company, and I was just having a heart-to-heart with her, and she said, work-life balance is not 50-50. Sometimes you're 90% parent, 10% employee. Other times you're 90% employee for a stretch and 10% parent, and it's kind of what you're saying. Now, in terms of balance, this to me has been such a challenge as a dad. You talk about social connections, and when you're young, you have this whole sprawling social network. When you have the demands of home, it is so easy to let some relationships lapse. And then you look back and go, oh my gosh, I've not talked to that person for a year. Or, if something came up, who would I call? Last night you were at the Phillies game. It sounds like that was a big emphasis in this. Men we know are less connected. A lot of times they're connected to other people through their wives. How are you thinking about that after all this?
Social connection and loneliness is something I've felt personally for a long time. This has come from, you do these great friends through high school and college, and like you said, like, just everyone moves away. Like, I can name 10 cities where I could go to, and I've got a friend there. Like, right. I could stay with some level friend and have meals, and we could get along for a few days and pick up right back up. But actually, where I was living in Philadelphia, no one from my college moved to Philly. No one, really just that tight-knit group was not there anymore, and it felt really hard to start over again. And so this also came up from, and I thank him so much, that the former Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, he put a ton of time and research into into loneliness, into the problems that loneliness causes and that we face, and particularly for men. But it was all parents and all adults. But it was an understanding that, like, yeah, we all suck actually at making friends. Like, we are in school and we're all doing the same stuff at the same time, and we're in the same classes and around the same people. it's very easy to make friends that way.
Yeah.
No one trains you how to make a friend when no one's around you and you have to start from scratch. And so he had done all this research as a medical professional, being like, this isn't medicine, but if we don't talk about it, the mental health side will absolutely overpower the physical symptom side. And so I give him so much credit for taking that on and then inspiring me to be like, I need to go make friends. I need to just tell people, I'd like to go out. I'd like to hang out. And some of the relationships blossom, some don't, but that's okay. It's about being social and being active and giving yourself permission as a dad to go make friends, because if you don't, you're going to be less of a parent and you're going to be less of who you are. You're not going to be your best self. And that's the advice I actually give every dad right now. I try not to give like newborn advice or anything. I'm like, when you have time for yourself, it's not selfish to take it and do something for yourself. Now, don't be abandoning your family, but like you need to take some time, and you got to give your partner the same time to go be his or herself as well, because then they can't take and shoulder all the burden either.
And you can kind of end up turning on each other if you have no one else to turn to in those moments. And
rely on your partner too much for that social connection, and men particularly rely on, as you said, their wives generally for that, or their partners, right?
Well, and it can feel selfish at the beginning to say, like, can I go out to dinner and can you stay here? Because you know that they need that too. So as you say, that you're both sharing that, that burden sharing in a way. Now, the remedy, I was honestly a little surprised. You said that, I wrote it down, couples night every Friday and guys night every other weekend. I thought, boy, is that ambitious. That seems like a lot.
It does sound like a lot. I will say this. Your kids are 6, right? About to be 6. It gets older, or it gets easier as they get older. All right. So actually, I will share this. For the first time a month ago, we left our son at home by himself, and we went to dinner, and he didn't die. It was amazing. So it was like, hallelujah. Like, so things start to, it gets a little bit easier. You can't, when they're younger, it's just almost impossible. So that,
especially if you live,
caveat, yeah.
Especially if you live away from people. I mean, to me, the really big drawback of
family support, you mean?
A lot of our stories, yes, is you go to college, you move to some big city for a good job, and then you have kids and you go, oh my gosh, where are my parents? Where is my support where I can say, hey, can I drop them off in 30 minutes? And someone will say, yes. That's a whole different experience in the cities. So that's been a difficult thing. If men are wanting to get started, do you feel
like you have family support? I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you feel like you have family support? Like,
all my family's in Missouri, and all of my husband's family is in Argentina. And so, for us, we have some close friends here, but you never want to feel like you're imposing. And would I take care of their kids in a heartbeat if they needed me to? Absolutely. Asking for that is a lot harder. And I think a lot of women are maybe better at that because, they have this, I don't know, that there might be more of a comfort between moms. Dads, I don't know many dads who call each other and say, can you take my kids? If you disagree, disagree.
On the dad part, I don't think I've ever seen a dad call another dad and be like, can you take my kids for a little bit? You're right. God, we should talk about that more. Women and moms, I think sometimes is a double standard that they're supposed to be able to do it all, so why would they ask for help? So I think if there's more of a familial, I think, relationship between them, I think it's easier to do it. But I don't know if you would call on another friend because, you're just supposed to be super mom all the time, and that's not right. But I feel like that is thrust on them in society.
And maybe even being super mom of, can I take your kids? Sure. I already couldn't keep up with what I was doing, but I'll do it.
Of course, you can always drop. You can always ask, right?
Yeah. If men are saying...
If you want to come to Philly, I will definitely take your kids. You guys have date night, okay?
They would love the Phillies game if they go with you and Gabe.
We're doing so well right now, knock on wood.
Real quick, if men are thinking, okay, I need more friends, I need more connections. I have talked on the show before. I would love to see more men in church. You are seeing more young men go to church than young women at this point, for probably a variety of reasons. You know, scouting can be good for young men, and their dads are involved. Any other things that through the course of this reporting this out that you thought, okay, yeah, this is a prime spot for men?
Like in terms of where men are
Where to
hanging
meet people.
out, where we meet people. Yeah, I know it's so much. It's not a lot. There was so much time we spent thinking about that because, like, I also recognize, like, I've chosen, like, I got a 17 game Phillies plan this year for the first time, and I did it, and I felt selfish at first, but then I brought a lot of friends to that games, gave some tickets away. I took my son, my wife took our son. It really did feel selfish at first, and then doing it, I'm like, great, this is so wonderful to spend time like this. But I recognize that it is a certain class level to be like, let me go spend money on tickets to a professional game, and that's what's been harder. It's like, where are the free things to do? Where are the, like, not gonna, break our takeout budget for the month by, because you go to a Phillies game, it's $25 a park, tickets were $50 each, and then if you want to buy food, you can't buy a water for less than $9.
Oh my gosh,
the stadium, so it's not a cheap thing to do. So finding a good place. So that's why in the show, like, I went to a pool hall with a buddy who I had worked with, but we've never physically actually hung out. And that was a lot of fun because we were there a few hours and it was not that expensive at all. That was more like $20. And that, the things like, but guys are just almost so much better. Sorry, I want to say better. Guys prefer to do an activity.
Yeah.
So there are these groups, even going back to Australia, there are groups that try to get men together simply by creating a project and being like, hey, who wants to just work on this project? Like, there's an organization, the purpose is to get men to bond just over some sort of, like, let's build a shed, together. And most men prefer to actually have an activity to do, and that's how we open up and bond. Whereas women can do an activity, or they can just sit down and start talking, and it's kind of just how they've been socialized differently than men.
Yeah. Joining a league too, it's fairly low cost and it's low stakes. It's only 1 or 2 hours a week, but being able to go play tennis with people, or bowling alone has been this thing. So bowling with a league or what have you, not a bad idea. And
are you in a league, or you want to join one?
No, I would like to play tennis more, but no. But I would like to.
I'd prefer tennis over pickleball. Sorry, don't get angry letters here. But pickleball, that might be the good medium. You can find that anywhere now.
I've never played. Can we do a grab bag before we go that I was just curious about after watching the series? Screen time is so important, and I know the older your kid gets, it's going to be, you describe your son Gabe's experience, and one of my sons, he cannot bear to lose Candyland, soccer, a game, video game.
Same thing.
So we really limit it a lot. But 9 years old, where'd you come down on screen time?
Thank you. Great question. We definitely reduced it. We monitored it much more, and we were fortunate that he really enjoyed playing sports, that began to help, that literally just practices and things like that began to take up some of that time. But the main thing I did, and I know not everyone can do this, but we had an unfinished basement, dirty as heck, but I'm like, we're going to clean it up, and we got a ping pong table. And now we spend a ton of time playing ping pong, and it's actually where I get the most insight into his life is him and me playing ping pong together. And that has been great. Like, if we can get a couple hours in a week, it's phenomenal. I learn all about his life.
That's great. And how interesting to see that budding dynamic of doing something together is when they open up, that he's a kid, but the little man growing up, eventually along the way, and just opening up in those moments. I noticed that too. I would never not want to pick my kids up at school, and I know that's not possible for everybody, but I like to be able to hear about anything that happened that day when they're not looking straight at me and you're not asking them, what'd you do and how was it? That sometimes you'll just hear something and go, oh, that's what caught you today,
Hey, but for the competitive kid, are both of them really competitive, or one is kind of a little bit more?
Only one.
I mean, multiple times I had to talk about perfection and how perfection actually is usually boring, and talking about like that perfection isn't really as much fun, and like there's no, I mean, it'd be schoolwork, it'd be Candyland, it'd be a video game, it didn't matter. Just we had to like get him out of that mindset of also like that's not the goal in life. Like it's so much more about the process. But multiple talks, I mean, starting to get it. It comes with time. Keep it up.
I'm writing that down because I have been, I'm not even going to say recovering perfectionist. I am a perfectionist. I often say I'm a type A plus, and but that's not a lot of fun in life many times, and I'd never even thought of putting that word to it, perfectionism, but it could be. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You seem to be largely, at least what made air, in agreement with all of your guests. Was there anything after doing this project that you went back and thought, I wish I would have pushed harder, or I wish, another voice?
Yes.
You seem to be in vigorous agreement with everybody.
Well, when you're doing a documentary series and these interviews, so like we've got this great podcast. Thank you again for having me. And all of my interviews are over an hour. I have hundreds of hours of content, and you will see more disagreement, I think, in the longer pieces that we put out. But it is trying to get so much information into a tight 26 minutes. Really, it's trying to tell a story from a lot of different perspectives. And also make everyone look and sound, great too at the same time. What, though, I want to find some more conflict purposefully next year, because I want to make sure that I'm open to more ideas, open to things that I haven't thought about. Is particularly, I would like to get another group of guys together, and kind of just see where it goes, because that was so much fun, getting the group in LA together who I did not know.
On that rooftop?
We talked for hours, and it was so much fun. Everyone stayed around for longer than we expected.
But one guy disappeared. Where was the other guy? He was there and then he wasn't there. He was there during the food, and then he was sitting on the couch. I said, who is that guy?
Oh, that's Josh. Okay, he's my senior producer. That's who that was. Josh is there. He's he was in B-roll. I like putting him in because he's such a big part of the show that he just doesn't get to show his face that much. Josh was there. Thank you for asking. He'll love that we talked about him. But I want to talk to
Justice for Josh. By the way, did you think about doing a sit down with moms? Because, I was watching this, and I've always wanted to convene moms of like an expectant mom of a young kid, and the mom of maybe a kid going into college, and all having us all together. But I'd love to hear the perspective of moms on dads too.
So I want to do an episode on equity. We kind of broached that a little bit before, and that has been how I want to start. Is with some moms that are doing it or about to do it and just making it work, and hearing that perspective. But I love getting those three age groups together. I may steal that exactly of how, or the three like life points, milestones they're at. I like that chance.
You can have it. Season 2, it's coming.
We're in pre-production. Knock on wood. I'd like to have something at the end of next year, and topics about things we're all dealing with. Again, it's the cost of having kids. It's about equity. It's about that birth rate. How do we actually combat that? And I would love to go to Japan or South Korea, because in countries that are like paying moms to have kids. Really, I mean, sizable amounts of money.
But it's not that effective.
It's not that effective. That's what goes back to that. It's about, I think, more equity in the home rather than actually. That's not just money.
Yeah.
And then
Because
personally,
even in some of those Nordic countries, you know, they free childcare, you get off 18 months or whatever. I heard that, I don't know where I heard this, that maybe in Singapore that there's subsidies to have grandparents live near grandkids, which I thought was so interesting. But it's
there's
not really that effective.
well, I didn't hear about that study. If you find that, send it to me. I'd heard about there's another country, Nordic country, that you can defer your private or your own like time off to a grandparent and give it to them. So you go back to work, but you're still getting the money by giving it to a grandparent to do the care, which I love too, because that's a great way to do it. Like,
Who will love your kid more than a grandparent?
of course,
Absolutely.
you want to keep it in the family. And then lastly, just dealing with travel sports, and it is a madhouse of what travel sports have become. There is more money in youth sports than there is in the entire NFL, to put that in perspective.
Are you talking to Linda Flanagan?
Oh, okay. So we just started researching this a little bit more. So thank you. I need
She's
to put
excellent.
her on the list. Thank you.
She was on this show, and she wrote the book on that, and private equity taking it over, injury from, being over-specialized to early. Linda Flanagan, excellent.
I just saw her name the other day, so thank you. Okay, I'm going to hit you up for that content.
She's so good. Okay, then can we end on this? And I'm sure this is something you've been asked 5,000 times, but after season 1 at least, you went in search of what makes a good dad. What can you definitively say makes a good dad, and what is either not a good dad or not important to being a good dad?
It is understanding that we need to look at what we were brought up with and recognizing that some of it worked and some of it didn't. And actually doing that kind of hard evaluation to say, what is it that we want to bring to the next generation? Recognizing that there's so much joy and fulfillment from this, and figuring out what does it mean to be a dad now, because we're able to actually change that definition and help the entire generation of our kids become better and not saddle them with so much bullshit that we had growing up too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And tell them, I think we're saying, oh, I love being a dad. And I always think, tell them, say, I love hanging out with you. I think you're so much fun. You're so smart. You're so much fun to be around. Because who doesn't want to hear that, especially from their dad, right?
I tell Gabe, I don't just love you, I like you. And I think he's starting to understand, like, that's kind of the best compliment I can do. Like, I'm always going to love you, but man, I actually like being around you, dude. Like, it is so much fun.
Yes, and you're not saving it for the big day, just the graduation, just the wedding. You're doing it every day. Joe Gidjunis, I love the series. I love what you're contributing to this conversation, and I can't wait for season 2. Thank you.
For you, thank you so much for doing this. And honestly, these conversations are so helpful and needed, and I'm thrilled that you have this podcast. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Joe. This really is the best time in history to be a dad. Kids, hug your dads. Dads, we're the lucky ones. Hug your kids and spouses. Tell them how you feel. Show them how you feel. We're not perfect, but my gosh, are we trying here? I think conversations like these, projects like Grown Up Dad, they're moving us forward every single day. So make sure you check out all of Grown Up Dad. I'll link it here, but if you want to log on, it's grownup.dad. It is a nonprofit, so if you pitch in, helps them keep going for season 2. Thanks for watching, All Boy. Please like and subscribe on Substack, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. The website's allboyallgood.com. I'm Chance Seals. See you soon.